Good morning. This is Marcus and Snowcat Fun here. This is part 3 of my Huina 573 Top Race TR 212 radio controlled dump truck modifications. So in this video, what I really wanted to do is more in depth of how I really got to where I am today with this dump truck modification. So we're going to kind of disassemble this truck and reassemble, and then I'm going to give you a little more in-depth information on my divider plate, where I modified and put my lower end here on from my WPL military truck, and converted this, added this lower section to the Huina top section with a divider plate. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to do a kind of a disassembly and go over exactly what it took to get here today, and continue on from my part 2. So if you look here, you know, we have this the dump truck, and you know, I wanted to take the cab off here so you could actually see this. So I've shown you how I did my cover with the magnets to hold the front cover on versus screws. I have a battery compartment here that I 3D printed. I actually built that battery box, or designed that on Tinkercad, and then there's a switch holder so that the cab just really snaps on and off. You kind of gotta work at it, but there's the cab coming off. So here's the cab. So we're going to set this aside here, and so here's my antenna, and I've hot melt glued the antenna here to the top of my 3D printed battery box. Now this is where that really heavy weight was that was on the Huina dump truck. This is my Fly Sky 10-channel receiver, and here's my Fly Sky radio that for my trucks. And so basically everything that I did was put everything inside. And if you look here, I 3D printed my battery box. This is from my switch assembly, so I added the switch here. I got my little resistors here for my LED headlights, and then of course here's the magnets that I use. So basically this section of the cab I laminated, and it's kind of hard to see right here, but I laminated this to the WPL dump truck frame with aluminum, and then I screwed it to the bottom. These 4 screws hold this whole cab assembly on the front of the frame. So that's basically how that was held together. So my electronic speed controller is right here. All the wiring goes back here. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and take off the dump truck bed, and we're going to start with that. And if you look at your original dump truck, the dump truck bed and gate wouldn't open up far enough. Once I made my modifications, I had to lengthen this just a little bit so that I could get the end gate to open up far enough. So we're going to take this, go ahead and take this off so we can get this dump bed out of here. And so let's see here. We have to do the Phillips head. Put my fasteners over here. And then we're going to take a pair of pliers. Hold this nut. So this is really going to be the disassembly. And then I'm going to show you these linear actuators that I used to replace the silly lifting mechanism that wouldn't lift the bed wouldn't lift the bed up. So then so we're going to push this out. This screw goes all the way through. It's a one-piece screw that goes to both linear actuators, and there are 3 spacers in here. So now we're going to take off. These are the original fasteners that held the dump truck bed on from Huina. Let's see here. Let's get this out here. There we go. There's one. Now we're going to take the other side off. Now that should release everything off of the dump bed. The dump bed now should be free to come off. So now we're going to have the dump bed off. So when I made my modifications, now you can see my linear actuators right here. So I have these 2 linear excavators, and these are both attached to my spacer plate. So this part right here, that part, this is from the original Huina. And so then on eBay, and I think I put a link to this location where the spare tire carrier was here. Then I took off and used hot stuff or super glue and glued on the parts from the old Huina dump truck. And because this is going to be dumping higher up, so this is the original dump and the original attachment points, but it wouldn't go up high enough, so I actually had to cut off the back half of this frame from Huina to allow this dump to go up higher when I added my linear actuators. So that's what we have here. Then I had spacers. So I have one single bolt that attaches the actuators, and I have little spacers that space out. And where did all my spacers go? Here's one more of them. Got it. So I have I have 3 spacers. I'm missing one. One of them fell out somewhere. So I have 3 spacers that space out the actuators. So basically I have a small one, a large one to go between to space them out, and then a small one here, and that keeps you from damaging or breaking these ears off when you tighten this single fastener. So that's what those 2 spacers are for, or 3 spacers are for. Let's put them over here. So there's the dump bed. And so I added this length. The original attachment was right here to these rods. So I added this extra length from here to here. So when the dump bed went up higher, the end gate would open up fully. Let's set this down. All right, so now you can kind of see here my linear actuators. So in my part 2, I have all the links to purchase these. So basically, this half right here is attached to my divider plate. We're going to set this down here. And so the Huina is attached with 4 screws right here. And how I did this is I used, we're going to go ahead and let's just take this off. Let's go ahead and get it off of there. Whoops, wrong one. All right, here we go. Is this it? Nope, still wrong one. There we go. So I have these little Allen set screws, and they are, I believe I used metric just because the silly thing was already metric. So dump that fastener out. So one fastener, and there are 4 here. So we're going to take this one out, this one out, and this one out. So now the WPL is removed or disconnected from my spacer plate that I've made it. So this is really the WPL, and now these 2 cables operate the linear actuators. So you can see these are the 2 linear actuators. Let's push this up. So there's my 2 linear actuators, and those will have to be disconnected from my circuit board. So we're going to disconnect those. All right, and it's to make sure we get the right ones here. So right here, I use 2 channels for those 2 actuators. And then I hooked them together, so we're going to pull this one. So we can remove that completely, and then we're going to remove this second one right here. And that way, so we're removing those from our receiver. And now the whole top of the Huina, the lower half, is disconnected from the WPL dump truck frame. So this is my shifter for my transmission. This was an update that I did, and I've got a 370 series electric motor and a 2-speed transmission. And then what I also did, this was a later update, even after my part 2, I went ahead and added dual wheels. I just did not think it looked appropriate to have single wheels on a big dump truck. So I went ahead and I added these, purchased these online, dual wheels, and they fit the original tires. And now I have a dually here. So this is basically short of the front half of the Huina dump truck. And you can see I've kind of taken a lot of stuff off here that was unnecessary. So I made room for my receiver, my battery box, my switch, my speed controller, electronic speed controller, and there's also my light control. This is what turns the lights on and off right here. So all of that is part of the WPL dump truck. And so how I actually did this, let's just set these screws in there. There should be 4 of them. There they are. So these are the 4 mounting holes that mount to my spacer plate. And in order to get the exact bolt hole pattern, what I did is I set the frame with these pieces installed on top of my divider plate, and then I used basically these transfer punches. So this is a sharp transfer punch, and I put the transfer punch in here. I lined up the plate, put the transfer punch in, and then center punched the holes, and then that way it gave me exact locations for these holes. So basically that's how I lined it up here for my divider plate. So this is that aluminum bar. I used 3/8 by 3 inch by, and it's about, I think it was, I said 8 inches long, I think, approximately. So That's a little longer than that. So we got about 7, 8, 9, 10. That's 11 inches long overall. And then because it's a pretty good size piece of aluminum and it was added a lot of weight to the truck, I went ahead and I milled out all these spaces. And then, of course, this one needed to be milled out. And then I cut this hole here. That way I had room for my transfer case and my electric motor and transmission so that it can actually set up inside here. So then also I had to attach my upper half of my Huina. Oh, there's my third bushing, so I'll put that over there. So we're going to set this off here for a moment, and then I'm going to show you basically my divider plate here and how this all works. So I use basically the same screws or same fasteners, but there's a location 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that is basically the same pattern as this lower half from the original Huina dump truck frame. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take this divider plate off so you can see how this all works. And then you'll be able to see my divider plate here. So as part of some of my comments that I've received here, you know, people really kind of wanted to see my process here, and so we're going to go ahead and pull this off so you can actually see this. Now, I had this apart here a short time ago. One of the reasons I had it apart was when I did my dual wheel modification. Whoops, did I lose a fastener? Should be 6 of them. 2, 4, 5. We're missing one. Well, we'll find it here in a minute. So here is basically, this is my divider plate that I machined out of that piece of bar stock. Now I believe you could use some different types of material, but when I added these dual wheels here, this was a little bit closer to the frame, this tire was. And so I went out and I used my fly cutter and I machined a little bit more material out, which actually reduced the weight a little more, to where the wheels, because the tires were actually rubbing on my divider plate. And so when I machined this out, that gave me a little bit more room where the tires with the dual configuration now did not rub on my divider plate. Now the question would be, how would I transfer this hole pattern to get exactly the hole pattern that I needed to bolt this onto the top half onto my plate, because it has to be very precise holes. Now if you see these, if you look closely here at my plate, they're countersunk just a little bit, because on this lug on the Huina upper half of their frame is raised just a little bit. And so I countersunk all of these holes, and that way when I put this on, it is actually located on those lugs and it can't move. It can't shift, it can't move, anything. It's actually countersunk into those holes. So it's a very, very tight fit. So how do you get the tight fit? So what we did was, I took my undercarriage, my frame here, and I turned it upside down. And if you look closely here, this is the same countersunk depth that I put on my frame right here, so that the top half, these ears will drop down inside and it locates it exactly. So what we wanted to do was, I need to take this pattern for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 holes, and I need those same exact hole patterns to be on here. So what I did is I laid this on top, got it all, because the width of this frame is the exact same width as this frame, so I set it on here exactly where I wanted it, locked it down and clamped it, and then I also used a transfer punch from the other side, and I punched the holes, or the exact center, with a transfer punch. So I purchased this set of transfer punches from Harbor Freight. They're a Pittsburgh tool. And so you just put this in the hole, and then you center punch it onto the aluminum. So in other words, this was turned over. I put the transfer punch in. I got it all lined up right where I wanted it. Took the hammer, tap, 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 and tap. All 6 holes now are precisely located from the original frame. So that's why you don't want to throw this away right away, because you're going to need this for your plate to get the exact location to mount all your parts, or to mount the upper half when you're ready to put it on. So that's how I got it accurately located exactly where I needed it. Now that's how the plate goes on, and now I can put my screws through in the exact locations as the other lower frame from Huina. So that's how I matched that bolt hole pattern. Exactly the same as I did with this 4 bolts for the WPL dump, or the military truck. So then I basically, the mount for the linear actuators came with a little bracket here. Each one of these came with one, and I only used one, and I used a hole punch, and I set this down a little ways, and then I center punched and I drilled a hole right here, tapped this, put a screw in, and now I use one fastener just like I do on the top half here, one bolt to hold both actuators on. So how this goes, in the dump bed, so we would have spacer, actuator, spacer, and then actuator and spacer, and then you have your nut to hold this assembly on. So likewise on the other side, I did the same thing. One single bolt with spacers to space out those actuators on my spacer plate. So there's a spacer here, here, and here, and one screw and I used elastic stop nuts so that they wouldn't come loose. So this goes on the dump bed, and then this goes on the spacer plate. And then this is what raises and lowers the dump bed. So I have these, and I should have been paying attention here. I don't remember right off the top of my head which channels I used, but I believe it was channels number, anyway, these two go on here, and then they're both through my programming on my Fly Sky transmitter. They're hooked together where they work simultaneously, even though I use two channels. So that works out really great. So anyway, I just wanted to go a little bit more in depth to my modification for my Huina, my 573 dump truck. And then because this is actually a little bit heavier now when it's all assembled, I use some heavier leaf springs. They're all metal leaf springs instead of the original plastic ones that this came with. Metal drive lines. So all three drive lines, rear ends. And then you can see right here, this is my servo. So I have a servo right here that operates the steering axle, because you get rid of that from Huina, and it was horrible on that control. So this is basically what I did to mount this all up. So I hope that's a little bit more information on how I did my modifications for my Huina dump truck using a WPL undercarriage, basically, modified 2-speed transmission, servo to switch gears, 2-speed, a 370 motor, Fly Sky 10-channel receiver, battery box. This is on my Snowcat Fun Tinkercad. I have posted this, and I believe this, I actually did post this battery box and switch on Thingiverse. So I printed those out, and then I used a hot melt glue gun to mount that battery box securely, and then printed the switch, mounted that on here for my electronic speed controller. And so there you have it. That's basically a really quick run through of my modifications to get me to this point with dual wheels. This was my last modification I did between part 3 and this part, or part 2 and this part 3. So I hope that kind of clarifies how I did this. And you know, I think a person could use a different material if you really wanted to. Basically, this is on here. Now, also, I did want to point out once again that if you look at this, here's the lower frame and here's the top frame. And when I marry these two parts together, you will see that the back of the Huina dump truck is almost 3/8 to 1/2 inch longer. And if you don't cut this off, your dump bed comes up and it hits this frame back here, and it won't go up high enough. So you have to cut the back half of this off just behind these ears so that the dump bed will go up higher. So that's one of the additions here. And then, of course, I opened up this whole section here on the Huina upper frame where the original arms came up and lifted the dump bed up. So I've just got a larger hole right here so that my linear servos, my linear actuators, can go through this frame. So then this would go on top right here, just like that. And then that, like I said, that allows the linear actuators to go through. Get that all out of the way. And now you can see how it's kind of all married together. So let's go ahead and we're going to reassemble this kind of in reverse order. Take these parts off. Spacers. spacers. Okay, and I'm still missing one of my screws. What the heck did I do with that screw? Well, I'm going to have to find it, or I'm going to have to locate another one. All right, so we're going to put this back on our frame. So this goes through. Actuators go through. It's all located. This cannot move the way I countersunk those screw holes, those fasteners. So then we have these 6 fasteners. Okay, I don't know what I did with the, I'm missing one. Maybe it fell off my table here. Well, I will have to find another one. We'll have to put it on later. So we're going to start these fasteners. And then this is what's holding the Huina upper frame to my spacer plate. And I believe I used the original screws that came with the Huina dump truck for my spacer plate here. So they worked out flawlessly. Well, there we go. And so then I added the air tanks, boxes, fuel tank, spare tire rack in place of that silly dump truck part. And so now we're going to have to thread these wires just kind of to give me some support here. We're going to have to take this upside down, and we're going to have to take the wiring up through here, and this frame goes on. And you make sure you don't pinch these wires with that adapter plate. And so then we're going to push these wires up through. Okay, stick that on there. And I have a little hole right here that those go through, where all the wiring for the transmission shifter, all of those go through here. Not much of a spot to go through there, but you can get them through. So once I get that through, there's one. Now we've got to get number 2 through. All right. Can't get that past that wire. There we go. Whoops, came loose. Try one more time here. There we go. Number 2. All right, now we can reattach the WPL dump truck back to the divider plate. And so I just threaded, I just used some long Allen head fasteners and I just tapped them. There we go. Start that one. Start this one. This one. And start this one. And basically that is what holds the WPL frame to the spacer plate. All right, now we're mounted back together. So there we go. And so now we're going to have to reattach these. I'm going to take a minute here. And I'm going to, I got to double check where my wires attach, which channels I used. I think this one goes right here. And that is channel, let's turn this transmitter on. And we're going to go to auxiliary channels and switch ABC is channel 5. So I have channel 5. So channel 6, 7. So channel 5 and channel 8 are the two channels that I use on my receiver to raise and lower these two actuators here, these linear actuators. So channel 8 and channel, so we're going to go back, 5 and 8. So I got to hook this up here to number 8, right here. And then we got to go up here to channel 5. Plug that back in. All right, there we go. So we're all tucked back in. And so what we're going to do, we're all reattached. So I'm going to put this together and kind of show you how this all works. Spacer, bolt, nut. All right, so battery, transmitter, truck. So now I can actually, this is where you can see both actuators. That raises it up. There is a middle position because this is my C switch is a 3-position switch and then down. Okay, so this is basically my drive forward and reverse. Then steering, left and right, and then my switch here, my switch A on my transmitter, turns on the headlights. And so basically that is how I've programmed my truck. And so, like I said, this is my throttle, and then this one is the transmission shifter. So I'm going to turn this over. We should be able to see the transmission shift. So when my B switch, that shifts the transmission from high range to low range. And that is basically the three switches that I use: headlights, transmissions, 3-position for the dump truck bed, and then my speed, steering left and right. And that is basically how this all works. So I hope that was really informative for you. Just go ahead and we'll go ahead and finish putting this up. Turn the receiver off. Turn the transmitter off. Transmitter off. We got to put some center punches back in the box. Transfer punches. All right, so now what we're going to do is we got to go ahead and we're going to have to hook up our, and so basically you can see here on the front of the truck, instead of using the screws that hold this front cover on, see those holes right here, those holes right here in that front cover went into right here. And it was so terribly hard to put the screws in and then just put the battery in and out. So I put these rare earth magnets on here. I epoxied them on there. And I have another set right here on the front cover. And that is what holds this front cover. And I mean, it holds it tightly in place. That's how that all works. All right, time to put the dump bed back on. Or, well, we can go ahead and we can put our top on. So on the top just snaps on. Once you remove all the original fasteners, the cab just snaps on like that. Then we have our front cover, and the cab is on. It's ready to go. So now we got to put the dump bed back on. Dump bed. Okay. So now we're going to put the back screws in first. Here's my helper right here. He's just been overseeing here. So you have these screws right here. And if you look at these screws, this is the original screws that held the dump bed on. And if you look at those screws, they are flanged. And so that's what actually holds. This goes through here and screws in here and here. And that's what holds the back dump bed on. And then this goes through. So these two here, this one all the way through these two lugs. I did have to grind this down just a little bit, and I had to grind the end of my actuators off just a little bit so I would have clearance to use these original lugs. So that's what I did there. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to put this dump bed back on. So dump bed goes in place. Line up the holes. So I've got a punch here. Line that all up. First screw. Put it in with my tweezers. Phillips head. Run that all the way in, just snug. Turn it over. We're going to do the second one. Uh-oh, had an accident there. So we've got to get this one lined up. Line up the holes. Tweezers to hold the screw to get it started. Whoops. Well, let's do it this way. There we go. Just snug on that screw. So now we can put our arms back on, and they kind of snap in place here. There's a hole there for those to go in. And we have two screws. Phillips head. I believe these are the original screws that came off of these arms. So I just reused the parts where I could. So that holds that arm. Next screw. Snug. Now we have the tricky part. And you know what you can do in this position, but you can see how high this dump bed will go up. What you can do to kind of help you out here, let's turn this transmitter back on. I'm going to flip the power switch on. And let's put this into position 2. And so you can see how those actuators are coming out. And that gives me a little more extra room here to work when I'm reassembling this. So actually we can go all the way if we want to. Spacer. Whoops. Got to take this spacer off. Screw. Spacer. Actuator. Long spacer. Push the screw through. Actuator. Push the screw through. And then spacer. Right here. So put that in. A little too far. Put your screw all the way through. Phillips head. And nut. Wrench to hold the nut tight. Switch to lower the dump bed. And so when I do that, you can see how the end gate is actually closing with these arms here. Fully closes, dump bed's back down. And there is our reassembled Huina. Well, I guess we got to say completely done. We got to put the front cover on, and it snaps in place. Whoops, didn't get it all the way in. Snapped in, front's in. And that is our assembled dump truck with a little bit more detail about the spacer plate and how I did the machining. I just machined out that aluminum bar stock, and then you can see I've machined out this section right here to give the tires with these dual wheel assemblies to keep them from rubbing on this spacer plate. Now, I think a person could use a different material, but it does have to be a material that you can use tap and thread, because I tapped and threaded. The screws come from the top and come from the bottom to fasten that on. So anyway, there we go. I hope you like. Please give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and again, thank you for watching, and have a lovely day.